All right. So, hi. This is a podcast from Certain Points of View. I'm Matt.
And I'm Corey.
And we are talking about Star Wars. And so, starting from the original movie, which is the fourth movie. But I think, starting with the very first movie that came out in 1977 is because it's the foundation for everything. And you look at it as, movies that we had. I mean, what was science fiction like before Star Wars?
Well, just pop culture in general was completely different.
Exactly. And so you look at, but look at what sci-fi franchises were out there. You had, Lost in Space on TV for a while. You had Star Trek on TV only. And that was like, you had 3 seasons of the live action show, and then there was this short-lived animated show for Star Trek. And movie-wise, you had Planet of the Apes, which came out in the early 70s. You've got, Lucas's first movie, which was a student film that he actually made into a theatrical movie, THX 1138. You had Space 1999, another movie like Logan's Run. Just trying to think of what else there was. I mean, a lot of it.
2001.
Yeah, 2001. Going back. I mean, that was probably
that was what
the most popular science fiction movie of the time. But the thing is, if you look at those, I mean, you look at especially the ones in space. Everything's sterile. Everything's clean. And then here comes Star Wars in 1977, which is you're in the middle of a galactic civil war, and you have everything looks lived in. Everything there's dirt, there's grime, and it's very different. Also, you think about like the music. I mean, George Lucas took a lot of chances with this. I mean, because it was. I mean, first off, there's special effects that he did for this were unrivaled. I mean, he was inventing technologies to make this movie.
Yeah.
And I mean, he started Industrial Light and Magic, a company just to come up with this stuff. And I mean, they were inventing cameras and the way they would shoot models and everything else. It was just insane how they changed everything. I mean, the highest grossing movie before Star Wars was Jaws. And I mean, there was another one with the big the big mechanical shark that Steven Spielberg used, and that was a big deal. But I mean, George Lucas is taking that to a whole different level. And I mean, you look at, just all these different choices. I mean, even the music. If you look at some of these, science fiction type movies, I mean, a lot of them are like B movie kind of things, but I mean, the soundtrack is very kind of, synthesized music, kind of disco. It wasn't a lot.
That was the era.
I mean, it was the era, but it wasn't, other than like 2001, which was
it was futuristic sounding.
Exactly. Yeah.
It wasn't the vibe of the modern era.
I know, but when he's saying he wanted this big orchestral score for the movie, people looked at him like he was nuts. I mean, this is a big, it wasn't really done in this type of movie. And honestly, do you think Star Wars, I mean, one of the, it's a big part of it is the music. I mean, John Williams' score through all these movies is just absolutely incredible.
Well, still to this day, it's hard to name a more iconic.
No.
Score.
Well, I mean, and you got to think of all the ones that. Just a side note here is, I mean, all the stuff that he's done. I mean, he did like the Superman movies with Christopher Reeve, Raiders of the Lost Ark. So many different movies that he did the music for, and you can kind of, it's got his style. He has a definite style.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just great. But, I mean, yeah, you come back, you think John Williams, you think Star Wars. And, I mean, it was just amazing. I mean, how much it was so different. And at the same time, I mean, you look at George Lucas, what was he doing? He was telling an adventure story of stuff like he saw when he was a kid at the theaters, like the serials, like Buck Rogers or Flash Gordon, those serials that they had in the movies. from back then. And he was just trying to tell that story on a grander scale. And I mean, you have influences like, Kurosawa, The Seventh Samurai, or, and stuff like that. I mean, he was pulling from lore from everywhere to make this.
Well, even going back to classical literature, it's still very much your traditional hero's journey.
Oh, absolutely.
Like I said, dating back to classical literature, just in a sci-fi futuristic, science fantasy futuristic environment.
Exactly. And you look at, I mean, a lot of it, if you think about it, I mean, there's some things in Star Wars and the first movie that, they just, these like iconic scenes, if you think about it, like, that. So here's where we talk about different points of view. I remember, I was 6 years old when Star Wars came out, and I remember, going to the theater and seeing it. And it was, I mean, this didn't open on a whole lot of screens at first. It took time. But when people started getting it, word of mouth came out. I mean, they had hit some science fiction conventions beforehand, but they weren't like, conventions back then were nothing like what you see today. Like San Diego Comic-Con was nothing like it was.
I know a thing or two about conventions. Oh yeah, I know. Yeah. It's a whole thing now.
Yeah, but I mean, what they did, I mean, one thing to get the word out about this movie, because it didn't open on a whole lot of screens. I forget the amount of screens, but it wasn't like a huge release at first. But it was, I mean, they went to conventions beforehand. They had, they had the novel. This is, most, you see a lot of movies like, you look at, like, we'll just use like Dune. That's a movie made from a book, whereas the novel of Star Wars was made from the screenplay of the movie.
Right.
So it was a little different, but they were shopping that around. Okay.
What's interesting with that too is you can see from that novel, you can see the evolution of the Star Wars mythos as George Lucas is still trying to figure out what was going on. Yeah. A lot of things that were in that original novel aren't necessarily present even in Empire or Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
Things, the original novel, the opening made it very clear that the Emperor was a figurehead. It was all of his advisors who were the true power behind the Empire.
Yeah.
The
guys around the table and in the conference room.
And then the Empire comes out, or Return of the Jedi comes out, and all of a sudden you're like, no, the Emperor does have power. Yeah. So you can see that evolution of the story just through the novelizations.
Right. So I think at the same time for this is, I mean, bringing up novels and stuff, it's a neat aside, but I think as far as like where it's canon is, what did you see on screen? It's a tough one to say. I'm just thinking
I really want to say my first experience with Star Wars was actually Return of the Jedi, and I think that's why it's always been my favorite. Is that was the first one. But thinking about the first, back to those, when I was a kid, thinking back to probably the first time I saw the original Star Wars, it's got to be the sunset scene.
There's that.
It's like, to me that was such just like.
I mean, as far as like an iconic scene that is, absolutely, that is one.
It's just so perfect in every.
Yeah, it's and the music, the way the music builds it is
the music, everything. the look on Luke's face for care. Not things I cared about when I was 5 years old. but looking.
Yeah, but you're looking at what There's so much portrayed in that scene.
Yeah,
like you said,
character building, world building.
But here's this, this kid on this backwater planet out on the Outer Rim, and he is, he longs to be in an adventure. He longs for more in his life. Yeah. Absolutely. But as far as a movie scene, now this is going back 77, people seeing this for the first time. The iconic scene is the opening shot when they, the words go by and everything, first off, it didn't say episode 4 at first. It just said Star Wars, and it told you see the opening crawl. It comes down on the planet. You see one ship go by, and then that Star Destroyer comes over and fills the screen. That's one of those moments, I swear, you could hear the air leave the room because everyone's like, and it's that shot. You realize you're watching something you haven't seen anything like this before. So you're looking at this grand scale I mean, it's shot like that. I mean, it's just that was just you're in for a ride at this point. And I was trying to think of other shots, other scenes in this movie that were just so iconic. I mean, you have the lightsaber duel between
but like just from a
Obi-Wan and Vader, which you hadn't seen much before that. You'd never seen things like that.
We already mentioned the sunset scene. That first scene in the cantina.
Absolutely,
is also pretty iconic. All of a sudden, alien pops up. Because up to that point, the only alien we had seen, we had seen a handful of Jawas, and then we had seen a couple Tusken Raiders.
Yep,
and that's it.
Yeah,
I think.
And
right?
You have that scene, and it's funny is like everybody loved that scene except George Lucas because he wanted, because he wanted more.
Yeah.
And he was kind of limited at the time. I mean, by he had budget constraints because he didn't have it wasn't like. At this point, making this movie was a gamble. It wasn't like a license to print money.
A modern day equivalent. This would be a movie that would be kickstarted. Crowdfunded. No studio's going to come near it, so they're going to go to the masses and convince them that give me your money.
Yeah,
that's the kind of movie this would have been back then.
No argument for me on that. I mean, it's just that. But the thing is you look at it, even with the limitations, this is also the only. Of all the Star Wars movies made, this is the only one that is its own self-contained story. It doesn't rely on other movies. I mean, they left it open at the end, that there could be more because Vader, you see him get away even though the Death Star is destroyed. Spoiler alert.
What?
I know. Just in case. I mean, I don't want to spoil a 44-year-old movie, but...
Excuse me. I think the statute of limitations on those spoiler warnings have long since expired.
I know. I couldn't help myself on that. But I mean, again, you look at, there's a lot in this movie where it's like, where you see scenes that, you see like the scale of the Death Star when you see when the Vader Star Destroyer is flying up to it, when you first really see the Death Star. I mean, it was mentioned in the opening crawl.
But no detail on what it was.
Exactly. And so it's those kind of things. I mean, it's like this movie was set up to just be this big thing. I mean, I don't think even George Lucas expected it to be as big as it got. It was just he wanted to tell a story.
I mean, going back and reading stuff about about like the cast and the crew, they're like, oh, this small little thing, and then find out how big it got, and like, no, we're gonna do another movie.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, it
was mind blowing for them.
Oh yeah. I mean, if you watch like Empire of Dreams, when you hear like Carrie Fisher talking about and how they couldn't believe how big a stars they became overnight. And again, this is the first blockbuster. Yeah. I mean, this is the first movie where you really see people lining up around the block just in hopes of getting a ticket to go see it. And it was huge for the time. It was unprecedented.
What's incredible too is that attitude has continued throughout the decades. Because I remember standing in line to go get tickets for Revenge of the Sith in 2005.
Yeah.
It's always it's less of a thing now that you can buy tickets on the internet easily.
Well, now it's
it's a lot easier. But even as recently as like I said, as 2005, I was standing in line to get tickets to go see that movie.
I got to that point where it was like, oh, you knew when they were coming out. You could get them a week in advance, but it wasn't like, today you can pick what seat you want.
That was also my first experience with cosplayers, and it blew my mind.
Yeah, but that was another thing that really kind of started. I mean, I don't know, like Star Trek still had its cult following at this point. I mean, it hadn't been in years. So you had people dressing up in Star Trek uniforms. You had the Trekkies running around. And at the time, they were called Trekkies. So I'm sure we'll get comments. Yeah. Oh, they were Trekkers. They were Trekkies back then.
You're actually right. Star Trek was my first experience with cosplayers because I remember going to a Star Trek convention in the late 90s.
Yeah. So, I mean, but there's another thing that came out. There was people trying to dress up like the characters and everything. It was, I mean,
there's a great photo that pops up every so often in cosplay and cosplay photography forums of this from the original Star Wars movie of this young woman dressed as an X-wing pilot, and it's
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. People talk about it because like obviously this woman has gone to seen this movie probably 2 or 3 times. That way she could get the details fixed in her head because it's not like you could go on the internet.
Yeah. And I mean,
Just
you got to think
reference.
to get that. You don't see an X-wing pilot until the briefing on Yavin 4. I mean, that's like you're through 2/3 of the movie. And then just studying that and everything else. Yeah, and it's like, you didn't have home video. You didn't have an internet. You didn't have... You had to go buy a ticket and go see the movie again.
All the reference books weren't out yet.
Exactly. There was nothing
and looking at that photo, it is a well put together costume by any standard.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's about as movie accurate as you were going to get for the day. And yeah, that was amazing. I mean, that people were doing that. I mean, I was just a 6-year-old kid. I just was like, let's go see it again. I swear my parents probably took us to go see that. I mean, we saw it in drive-ins. We saw it in the theater because it just was out. I mean, it was like it left the theater for a while because other movies would come in, but it would come back. You know, I mean, they re-released it.
Movie-going culture in general is different now. You know, thanks to that.
Oh, yeah.
Because typically, you know, you're saying it was out of theaters and then it was back in. Typically, movies, you know, once their theatrical run now is done, it's done. Occasionally, you'll get movies back in theaters. Like actually, just yesterday, Avatar was re-released in China to try to beat Avengers.
That's not going to happen.
Actually, they already passed it. But movie-going culture in general is a lot different now because of things like home video and streaming.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have that back then. There wasn't even. I mean, most people didn't even have a VCR in their house.
Yeah. I mean, I remember even into the late 90s, early 90s. I remember my family getting our first VCR.
Yeah, we had. Yeah, it was like mid 80s. We got a VCR, but because that was when then all of a sudden the concept of home video was a thing, and then like the chains like Blockbuster showed up. Yes, kids, there used to be this thing called Blockbuster where you could go and you could rent movies.
That was
kids won't know anything like that. I'm like, what are you talking about? You got Netflix.
Going to Blockbuster on a Friday to rent a movie and a video game was the highlight of the week.
Good Lord! I mean, that was like a Friday night thing. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was still the high. That was the even up into the into the aughts. That was like the cool thing. Like yes, let's go.
Well, it was like I remember when I moved. I got stationed in Alaska, and it was like my first day in Fairbanks, and I went out to lunch, and I was like, "Oh, good, there's a Blockbuster."
You know what's funny about that is I had the exact same experience. Getting stationed in Colorado Springs was my supervisor taking me on a tour around town, showing me where all the stuff was. Like, there's the Blockbuster. I'm good to go.
Yeah, what was it? Yeah, it's not there anymore.
No, it's like an urgent care.
Yeah,
the building's still there, but it's urgent care.
I mean, but that was the thing. It was a whole. I mean, that was a. I mean, but even Star Wars was even before that. And I mean, so it was like. You couldn't just go rent the movie again, so you wanted to see it, you had to go find it in a theater somewhere. And this was something that they released it again. And, it got released in the theaters at least twice. Because then it came out, when they were working on Empire, because this was so successful that when it was re-released, so it said, all of a sudden they had to change the opening crawl. So it said, the Star Wars goes by, and then it said Episode 4, A New Hope. So now you're like, even before another movie came, it was so popular they knew they were going to have to expand on it.
Starting the tradition of George Lucas altering his movies.
Yeah, but it was the first alteration. Yeah, I mean, this is pretty special edition.
Well, I never even thought about that would be the first. That's awesome.
But it was to make a grand. But he wanted to tell like this episodic story, and he had the ideas for the prequels. Or he had rough drafts of this stuff. And I mean, he changed it along the way, and as we go through these movies, we can talk about those. But I mean, you think about so let's kind of bring it back to the story itself a bit, and we look at the foundation. This, as we're saying, Star Wars is the foundation for all of it. So you kind of found you're laying the foundations for this universe. So they've set it up. it's a period of civil war. It's right there in the opening crawl. So you have the Empire, which is, is pretty much has control of the galaxy, and then you have this rebellion that's more, they're striking from some hidden base somewhere. They had, they're an insurgency for the most part. And, so if you look at their tactics, I mean, you have the Imperial strategy, of, everything's big. It's power projection as we look at it is, the Star Destroyer as it comes in. It's huge.
It's very much a Soviet style strategy of quality. Quantity has a quality of its own.
Yeah. I mean, they're massive. They are a force. They are the unstoppable force. But that's, at the same time, they're thinking large scale. They have, the Death Star itself. It's not, when you see later on with the tactics that they use, they don't consider, well, it's their weapon of mass destruction. Okay. It is, it's the power you just blow up a whole planet. And it's not something that's been seen in this galaxy before. On this scale for one weapon to do it. Because, I mean, even later on when they said when they're in the Falcon and Obi-Wan says that the planet's been destroyed by the Empire, and even Han can't believe it. He goes, no, they need, the whole Starfleet couldn't do this. But, like I said, we were looking at the Empire as everything it's big, it's power projection, it's intimidation. You have this fleet of Star Destroyers, which are just massive ships. And, everything's built like large scale. Everything is, it's...
Which is interesting when you stop to think about it and compare it to the disposability of their smaller units. Like stormtroopers are, basically...
they're just conscripts.
Stormtroopers are easily replaceable. TIE fighters are easily replaceable.
Well, TIE fighters don't even have shields.
No shields.
That's one thing is if you look at in the battle, I mean, we can talk about those tactics in a bit, but I mean, if you look at, their shield, like the Falcon has shields. TIE fighters, one hit, they're done. But there's so many of them. They're cranking them out. Yeah.
Look, going back to into the expanding universe a little bit, it makes it very clear that they don't even have life support systems on a TIE fighter.
The short range ones,
the standard TIE fighter that we're used to seeing is the pilot's got to be completely encased in a vacuum suit. Yeah. In comparison to the X-wing pilots, where they're
But that's that's also another tactic of the Empire. If you look at the stormtroopers, they're faceless, they're monolithic. For the
stormtroopers, yes,
that's an intimidation of itself. But even the TIE fighter pilots are the same way. They all wear.
But I think that's more to do with like I said, more to do with the fact of the disposability of the spacecraft. That it's they're these swarm TIE fighters. Yeah, sure, we can lose 30 of them, but we got 100 more to. It's like Hydra. You kill one, there's 3 more going to be right behind it.
Yeah, no, I see your point, but I think there's a dual role in that. With the I agree. You have this monolithic force. They're just there, and there's a massive amount of them. Yeah. Whereas you look at the rebels, they're small, they're mobile, they strike from it's more insurgency. It's
lightning raid,
it's raiding, and then then they're going back and hiding. They have to hide. It's more guerrilla warfare. Yeah. And but and then it comes down to, I mean, a lot of it is also a reliance on the Force. I mean, this is, if we go back, the Force is obviously, as far as Star Wars is concerned, it's one of the biggest aspects of it, is you have this, they talk about it in all of it. And you get an introduction to it in this movie when Luke is talking with Obi-Wan. And it's, because, here's Luke who's, doesn't know anything about, well, he knows, his parents are dead is really all he knows. He knows his, he doesn't know much about his father. I mean, his aunt and uncle lied to him, said he was a navigator on a spice freighter. And then, but turns out he was one of these Jedi Knights, these guardians of peace in the galaxy that were there for 1,000 generations, which is, 25,000 years roughly. And, when Obi-Wan is telling him this story, it's, he tells him, it's like, you have the Force. It's this energy field that is created by all living things. Surrounds us, penetrates us, binds the galaxy together. And, it's what gives a Jedi his power, as Obi-Wan explains it. And we see him use the Force a bit, when he saves Luke from the Tusken Raiders. He makes a crate dragon sound. And then, and then later on when they're going to Mos Eisley, he's able to influence weak-minded people like stormtroopers, so they can get past the checkpoint. Because, yes, these were the droids they were looking for. And then you also have, what else does he do? So, he's later on when they're on the Death Star and he goes and shuts down the tractor beam so that they can escape. There's, another great scene is just for any military guys knows when there's two stormtroopers that come out there. They're being posted somewhere. Two grunts posted somewhere.
It's 2E3s just BSing their way through the day.
Well, the thing is, they're given some crap detail. They don't even know why. They just assume it's a drill. They're just kind of hanging there. But he makes it sound like he makes a sound to distract them so he can get away. So he's able to use stuff to distract and
I'm not going to go check it out. It's not my problem.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's nothing.
I relate to those two stories more than just about any other character.
I love that.
But it's small little glimpses in the power of the Force, right? Because you also see Luke getting a little bit of a taste of it on the Falcon,
right?
When he's
exactly where he's a
lightsaber.
Yeah, there he is again. He says the Force, it can guide your actions, but will obey your command. Is what Obi-Wan says.
It's small little bits of world building.
Yeah,
establishing what this thing can do.
Exactly, but there's also more to it too. I mean, because you see Obi-Wan's version, and he says, and he mentions it too, that because he asks when Luke finally asks how his father died, and he says, well, he was killed by Darth Vader, Obi-Wan's apprentice, who turned to evil. And he was seduced by the dark side of the Force. So there's a light side, there's a dark side. And, and when you look at Vader in this movie, when he starts talking about the Force, like I said, there's another great moment when he flips out in the staff meeting and chokes a coworker.
And we also relate to that.
Oh, I can totally relate. But
yeah, right.
Anyway, back to in that briefing room where they're talking and we have the one Moff who's like, this station is the ultimate power in the universe and we should use it. He's right. And Vader's like, no, compared to the Force, blowing up a planet's insignificant. He looks at the Force as a source of power, and I think you see that because they don't really mention Sith. You hit the Jedi, but they don't really mention the Sith in this movie. It's later. It's much later when they bring that up.
I think in the novelization
they do mention it's mentioned in that
they refer to Vader as Lord
of the Sith. Exactly.
Other than that, nothing.
But yeah, there's nothing really in the movie. There's no real definition to it yet. It comes up later.
None of the original trilogy says the word Sith.
Oh.
It was only in written documents.
Right. But you're looking at Vader who, again, he looks at the Force as it's a source of power. And, that's when he just sits there and does this and starts choking the guy, because the guy starts mocking him. Yeah. Which, and honestly, I'm sitting there, when 6-year-old me in the theater was watching when Vader walks in the door, when the first time you see Vader on the Tantive 4, when they've captured it. And he comes walking in. You're less like, whoa, that's a bad guy. And, you see him later on. He's got the guy by the throat, lifting him up, crushes his throat. I mean, stuff like that. This is not somebody you trifle with, basically. They've set that up pretty quickly in the movie, that Vader is a bad man and you don't mess with him. And now here you are, and the staff meeting scene when they're talking, and this guy's like, he's like, no, this station is the most ultimate power in the universe. We should use it. And Vader's like, don't be so proud of this thing. It's insignificant next to the Force. And he just starts mocking him. He's like, don't try to frighten us with your sorcerer ways. And then Vader just starts choking him, just going like this, and goes, well, I find your lack of faith disturbing. And then, kind of brings it back to the, Tarkin brings it back to the matter at hand, because it's just, but looking at how he uses the Force, I mean, even later on in the duel, Obi-Wan kind of uses that against him a bit, because he say, your powers are weak, old man, and like you can, and Obi-Wan's like, you can't win. If you strike me down, I'll become more powerful than you can imagine. And there's a guy who thinks that the Death Star is insignificant. So it's, I think it's interesting the way that they both look. I mean, here's your view of the light side and dark side of the Force, where it's, is where the Jedi kind of, they use the Force, they do see it as a source of power, but not like Vader.
It's, to quote other Jedi, it's their ally.
Yes. But I mean, that's kind of comes later. Later. That comes up later, and as this grows, where Jedi use the Force, yes, they do, and but you even see, I mean, like later on they say it's knowledge and defense, so he uses it, as he's sneaking around and like Obi-Wan sneaking around the Death Star not being seen, or letting the Force control your actions, kind of like a danger sense, it's your spidey sense or whatever, or in a fight, like you'll see later on when they're using lightsabers to block blaster bolts. I mean, you have to have, it helps the reflexes. They can see, as he says later on, seeing things before they happen. But again, we don't really know that yet. It's just this stuff, the Force, it can control, he says it controls your actions, but it will obey his command. And so, and it's an interesting flip side of seeing how Vader looks at it. Because Vader, it is, it's just basically, it's power, and he wants, and it's always more power. You can't stop him. And it's, even when he said, like when he meets Vader, when he meets Obi-Wan, and he's mocking him in that duel. When I left you, I was a learner, but now I'm the master. He feels like, he's telling, Obi-Wan he's weak compared to him. And it's just, it's an interesting kind of, I want to say dichotomy, but just looking at how they view the Force. And it's just kind of an interesting thing. And and again, it's another thing that gets built upon in these movies.
A lot.
Oh, big time. And I mean, honestly, and then like later on, I mean, even when Obi-Wan, when they're trying to escape the Death Star, and he realizes he's distracted all the troops so that Luke, Leia, Han, and Chewie and the droids can get away, which have the plans to the Death Star for, it's, I mean, going back to like, we'll go into a bit, but, so he knows, and I mean, he sacrifices himself. I mean, that's kind of a Jedi, you find later on, a Jedi's thing is being selfless. It's sacrifice. It's, so here he is, he gives, brings it up, and, his saber like that. And Vader takes, sees it opening and thinks he kills him. But almost immediately, he's still telling Luke, run, because Luke flips out and he's trying to shoot everybody. And so you have, but he tells, no, run, Luke, run, or even during the battle. I mean, he's guiding Luke through the Force. Like later on when we look at that battle, I mean, Obi-Wan is, he's guiding Luke to win, to help. He's helping him. He's still the mentor. It's just a interesting thing. But then, so, that's basically, I guess, what we know of the Force now.
Up to this point.
In this movie. That's what you see. And I mean, so, I mean, honestly, it gives you, you have like eternal life, right? Basically, you life beyond death through the Force. You're able to contact others.
And it makes it clear that that's not a universal thing.
Yeah, because
when he tells Vader, he's like, "I'll become more powerful than you know," he's saying,
"You're not going to be able to do this."
Yeah, I have learned things that
you can't do this.
Yeah.
No, exactly. So that's an interesting way. I mean, setting up this stuff, and it's, and again, this is the foundation, and this is what we know here. So it's, you see, like, where he does, where you look at how Obi-Wan uses the Force, where it's, he'll mind trick somebody so they can get past. He'll make a distraction, or the crate dragon sound to startle the Sand People or something like that. As opposed to Vader, he'll choke somebody out.
Yeah, we don't see a direct application like we do with Vader.
Exactly.
A softer touch, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to look at it. So then, so we go back and kind of bring it back to, so here, you have the Empire and you have the Rebellion. We kind of talked about how, the Empire, everything is, it's big, it's intimidation, it's power projection. We are the unstoppable force. You need to kneel before us. You're going to be crushed under our heel, kind of look.
I feel like one of the things that also points to that is when Tarkin first comes into the staff meeting saying, the Senate's gone. We have the direct authority now to impose our will upon the systems.
Yep. The Emperor just wiping. Yeah, they're about fear and power projection.
It establishes a lot about what the Empire is all about, but it also builds the galaxy a little bit more. Like, there's a Senate. What?
Yeah. So the Senate, there was a Senate, and it was a bureaucracy.
Yeah.
As a means of control.
Yeah.
Or kind of like, it's almost, if you think about, if you look at it, it was like the Senate at that point was like the illusion of choice.
It harkens back to the Roman Empire, when you had the Roman Republic, and then you had this gradual transition from Republic to Empire, and there was still a Senate in the Roman Empire, but power resided.
It had no power. Yeah, exactly.
The power resided with Caesar.
Yes, and then here it is again, and then now he just decided that we don't need this Senate anymore, because I mean, even Leia was a member of the Senate. And she's like, no, I'm doing this. I'm a member of the Senate. You can't be doing this. When they attack her ship. Yeah. And no, you're part of the Rebel Alliance. You're a traitor. And no,
take her away.
But here again, now we're looking, that's a good glimpse into kind of rebel tactics. I mean, we're talking about insurgency. We talk about, but everything is kind of almost, they will take the chance. And I mean, even though the Jedi, like Tarkin says, that the Jedi they're really Vader's the last of that religion, which is odd because but they don't. I mean, even Luke didn't really know what the Jedi were, but you look at probably the people in the Alliance, the Rebel Alliance, do, because they still. You'll hear them later on when when they may the Force be with you. Kind of, so there's
it much later on.
They still have that.
Much later on in the franchise's history, we start to find out more details about who knows what stuff.
Oh, exactly. But for
limited.
We'll get there.
limiting just to the original movie.
Yeah, but here, but you still get that hint that the rebels do kind of, rely on I mean, they'll take a chance and hope, like Leia. I mean, well, that she was going to Tatooine to get Obi-Wan,
who served her father in the Clone Wars.
Exactly, because they didn't know who he was. Yes, General Kenobi, but when there's a point, they know they're not going to get away, and she does the last ditch effort of this desperate move of taking the plans for the Death Star and putting them in R2-D2. And then she gives him the mission. You have to find Obi-Wan and you have to get these to Alderaan. You have, get this message to him. And I mean, it's a desperation move.
Self-sacrifice is a theme in these movies. In the first movie, like Leia obviously knows that she's given up. She's sacrificing herself to make sure those plans get away.
Yeah,
Obi-Wan sacrifices himself
so that they can get away.
Yeah. Big sacrifices himself to protect Luke.
Yeah,
it's something we see again and again with the rebels.
Yes, and it that is a thing that they will do. I mean, it's their whole point is they have to get because I mean they just mentioned that they just won their first major victory in the opening crawl, and it was to get these plans, and it's everything to keep hope alive. And so it was that you do that desperation move. You give it to this droid and hope he can get it done. And they're just lucky enough that they're not blowing away every escape pod that goes away, and only the ones that have people in it. And then so now they're like, oh, she just hit it, and oh, she just hid the plans in the escape pod. We'll go down and get them. And then there's droids. So then they gotta, now they're scouring their planet for 2 droids, and I mean, you got to think that's like looking for a needle in a stack of needles. I mean, if you think about droids, and if you look, I mean, they're kind of like in the background everywhere.
Yeah,
except the cantina.
They're pretty ubiquitous across. Because like even on the Tantive 4, R2 and 3PO aren't the only droids.
No, there's droids all over the place.
Yeah, we see other droids on board. We see other droids on the Star Destroyer, on the Death Star. Not on the Star Destroyers, but on the Death Star.
Yeah.
In and around town. They're part of the background scenery.
Exactly. So I mean, it's kind of a desperation move, but it's one that has decent odds until they realize that they're looking for droids.
We also, I think, we see that the Empire is more competent than I think the average fan would have you believe. Like, there's always that joke about stormtroopers being pretty inaccurate.
Yeah.
But we see them absolutely just rinse through the rebels on board the Tantive 4. We see them conduct.
That's the only time you do it. That's the only time they hit anything.
Hoth.
I'm kidding.
But we see a pretty effective. Them execute a pretty effective planet-wide search and find their objective pretty quickly.
But but that's the thing is they
have the resources.
They have the resources. They have control, and and it's the thing is like even like later on when Leia's talking with Tarkin. It's just like the more you tighten your grip, the more star systems are going to slip through your fingers. Even Luke is like, I don't like the Empire. I hate it, but there's not. When the call to adventure finally is in his lap and he's refusing the call.
One of the things that comes up in some of the expanded universe books is that the Imperial, I don't want to say occupation, but the Imperial operations on Tatooine inspired a lot of additional sympathy for the rebellion.
Yeah.
Even in and I want to say it's from Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina. One of the stormtroopers ends up defecting.
Yeah.
So they're heavy fisted, like Leia was saying. Their heavy fisted ways are.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a resistance. I mean, you look at you have the World War II. Nazis roll over France in the Blitzkrieg. There's the resistance. There's always that element underneath, and that's where the rebels live. In this, and it's they have this hidden base. They strike from there, and it's and the Empire is just about crushing opposition, and they have the power to do it.
They just got to find it.
And it's always, it's
One thing that's always come up, in real world history, is it's very hard for a traditional military to quash a resistance without heavy handed tactics.
yeah. I mean, it's an insurgency.
We've seen it in the classically tactic was our Revolution War. Guerrilla tactics were perfected then, and then were adopted throughout.
Yeah, I mean,
The Ho Chi Minh during the Vietnam War said, I took inspiration from George Washington and the way he did things.
exactly. I mean, it's hard to fight. Yeah, you're fighting it. They're definitely fighting an asymmetrical war.
Yeah, and we've seen time and time again
Yeah.
it is hard to quash it.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at the Rebel Alliance is David fighting the Empire's Goliath. I mean, it's again, but the thing is, the Empire does have a big weakness in its hubris, and you see that played out not only in this, you see it all through especially the original trilogy. Yeah. They are, there's a hubris there where, I mean, even but sitting here as like, they realize, okay, they're not going to throw a fleet at the Death Star because the Empire is expecting that. And it's, but, even though the Rebel Alliance it is fairly well funded. They have equipment, but they can't do a toe to toe like you said, the Revolutionary War. The Colonials could not line up in a field and go toe to toe with the Redcoats.
And almost every time they did, they
lost.
They got the crap kicked out of them.
Yeah. So, again, you change the rules of the game. You've hit them where they're weak, and deny them the battle. So here when we get to that point, so it's always it's like the rebels do have a trust in the will of the Force, though, because there's always the desperation move, giving R2 the plans, and then later on, I mean, it's okay. We found if you put a proton torpedo in this 2-meter exhaust port,
that's impossible even for a computer.
Yeah, that it turns out it is impossible for the computer. But that's always their play, is to take the chance, because it's like they don't have any. If you look at the rebels, I mean, at that point they really have nothing to lose. The Empire knows where their base is.
Right.
But again, they were willing. I mean, here they are. They were willing to let the Millennium Falcon get away. From the Death Star, they had them. All they had to do, hold them in place. They could have stopped them. But they decided they. I mean, well, even Tarkin says they take a bit of a risk, letting them get away, so that they could, because they have the plans. I mean, even when the Falcon shows up at Alderaan, or the remains of Alderaan, and they get caught in the tractor beam, they're like, oh, they're trying to bring the plans to the princess. They didn't, and at the same time, they start scanning the ship, or they think they start scanning the ship, and so they're going through, and here they are. They have the plans. They're right there on the Death Star with the plans, but they let them get away. Oh no, we'll find that. It's hubris. I mean, even though Tarkin says it's a risk, it's a bit of hubris. Is like they're gonna find they're gonna lead them to the rebel base, and they're just gonna blow it up, and that's it. We're done. We've won. I mean, even Vader's got that hubris when they show up at Yavin 4, and they're like, this is going to be a day long remembered. We've seen the end of Kenobi, and now we're going to see the end of the rebellion. Not knowing that they know the weakness. I mean, and even Tarkin at this point he has a bit of hubris when he realizes, here they are throwing their, they don't throw a fleet at it, they throw their fighters at it, because they can get through the defenses, because they're not designed to it, and they realize, hey, these guys are so, their ships are so small, they're avoiding the turbo lasers. So now you have so okay, we got to send out fighters to fight them. And then they realize what the attack is. They're going up the trench to, for the exhaust port. And now you have, Vader takes 2 wingmen to go out there and take care of that attack. Because and then after, they vandalize the attack and they tell, the guy goes up to Tark and is like, hey, look, we vandalized our attack. There's a bit of a danger here. This could be effective. Should I have your ship standing by? And he's like, and at that point, even Tarkin's like, evacuate? Our moment of triumph? Are you crazy? You overestimate their chances. He thinks they've won already.
Which is definitely interesting. Tarkin, from what we've seen, seems to be an effective commander up until that point.
Absolutely. But again, he suffers from the weakness of hubris.
Yeah.
And the overconfidence. No, we've got this one. They're sending these small fighters at us. Okay, we couldn't get them with these lasers. Our main defenses. We got fighters. We got fighters to spare. And if you look, they were pretty effective after they're pulling away. After Luke takes the shot. What's left? And but for Han Solo coming back at that point, they were, the Empire was this close to winning that battle. Yeah. But look at what pulls away. There's a Y-Wing, there's a couple of X-Wings, and the Falcon.
Luke and Wedge and a random Y-Wing pilot number 4.
Yeah, exactly. And it's that tag. That the Rebels threw every effective thing they had at them, if they didn't win, that was it. It was kind of I want to say a desperation move on their part, but there wasn't. If they lose that battle, they lose everything.
It definitely was a Hail Mary.
Yes, good point. That's a good way to put it. But again, you look at what lines up in that battle for, because you have there's 3 attacks on the exhaust port. You have the Y-Wing attack at first, Gold Squadron going in, and they get wiped out before Vader takes them out before they can get close.
Garbage fighters, those Y-Wings.
But you look at them; they're definitely the light bomber.
Yeah, it's a slow moving bomber.
Yeah, you look at it's. I don't want to say the F-15E because that's like the coolest.
No,
aircraft
they're more equivalent to older scale, looking like the B-24 bomber from World War II,
or like an F-111, I would say.
Well, now you're getting into offensive territory for my family's heritage.
I'm not saying that it's a bad aircraft. I'm actually trying to defend both.
It's effective at its given mission. In this particular instance,
it's a light bomber. It's not. I would hesitate to think that it's a dogfighting type of vehicle.
There's really not a real world equivalent, I think, to what the
it's
Y-Wing.
Hard to it's
obviously you can equivalent the F-15 or the X-wing to the F-15 as an air dominant / space superior. I would say
a multi-role.
The F-15E multi-role strike aircraft. Whereas the Y-Wing is not a Y-Wing.
It's your light bomber. It's like the F-117. They gave it the F designation.
Yeah, there we go.
But it's very much a light bomber. It does not have the dogfighting capabilities. It is meant to drop a small payload. That's why, again, I look at the F-111. It's a similar type of fighter.
Yeah. And we see, we only see them in this one instance in this movie, but we see it time and time again in expanded universe sources that that's what the Y-Wing is for. It's not meant to mix it up with other fighters. It's meant to hit larger targets, hopefully with an escort of a more capable superiority type spacecraft.
Yes, but and that's the thing is you look at their tactics too. You're sending 3 in there, and you have the one guy taking the shot, and you have 2 wingmen to cover him. Now again, the way I look at it, because it was always kind of weird, is like you have 2 guys back there just, I mean, they're not wild weasels. They're not trying to get shot at. I don't think,
No,
because they're just sitting there. But what I look at it as is looking at the capabilities where X-wings and Y-wings have shields where TIE fighters do not, and so they're layering shields to protect the guy taking the shot.
This and it's a real world tactic. We've always seen.
Yeah.
You always pair two fighters up, and the wingman is always there to watch the leader six.
Yeah, and they're keeping an eye open for fighters, but they're not breaking off to attack the fighters.
No.
And you would think that would be something that would do, but it's more of they're back there and they're using their shields to protect the guy taking the shot. And then, but it's Vader, and he's the lead guy there. Where he has his two wingmen just to cover him. Where I think if another fighter was to come in to take out Vader's ship, those TIEs next to him would break formation to take care of that and then come back. Kind of thing. You don't see it in the movie. This is all speculation. But that's the way I look at this battle. So, the Y-Wings go through, but they don't make it. Then you have Red Leader with his two wingmen go in. He actually does get to take the shot, but it doesn't work. And here it's, it just impacts on the surface. And a lot of that is, they bring it up in the briefing where it's like, that shot's impossible even for a computer. And Luke's like, no, it's not impossible. He could do it in his T-16. So it's... But you see here, when Red Leader, he gets to that shot, he takes it, and it doesn't work. So even when now Luke's going through with with Wedge and Biggs, and Wedge is like, are you sure the computer can hit it? And I think we realize, no, the computer can't hit it. And that's why, like, during that Luke's trench run, there's Obi-Wan's telling him, use the Force, let go. So, it's let go of the technology. Because he turns the computer off and everyone asks if he's okay. What are you doing? And he's like, no, I'm fine. I got this. But I mean, you look at it, he loses his best friend in Biggs. He loses, Wedge gets hit. He can't stay back there. Loses R2-D2. Luke is truly alone in those last few seconds. And then Vader even has him dead to rights. But for Han Solo having the change of heart and coming in, and taking taking out Vader.
It was established in the expanded universe that he actually got boarded by pirates, and they took the money he had been given as a reward. And
that's why I don't really like to go through expanded universe. It
makes sense why he stays with the rebellion after Yavin instead of going to pay off Jabba.
Yeah. No, I like. Yeah, because
I
know, but some of it. There were some good stories there, and I kind of want to keep this. I like to keep it. The visual media it trumps everything else. Let's say, okay. So anyways, movie trumps books. TV show trumps. What you see, because it's a visual story. And don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of the expanded universe, a lot of it anyway. But yes, but they set it up. With Han, it's set up in the movie for him to reach. This is the guy. He's the jaded scoundrel. He's doesn't believe in anything. He's doing stuff out of desperation. He's helping. He's kind of helping them because he needs the money. He's the mercenary. And when they get through they get through the Death Star and they get back, they escape, and then even Luke is like, you see what they're up against. You know what they're up against. They could use you. And he's like, no, this ain't my thing. You should come with us. You'd be good in a fight, But, as he's putting his reward, he's got his reward and he's taking it, putting it on the ship. And even Chewie's like kind of on his case about it. And he's like, what do you like? I know what I'm doing. It's like, it's more of, we got to get clear of, he's got to get clear of this bounty on his head. But he does have that change of heart and come back. And, whether it be because of the Force or whatever, but he does have that, he comes back and helps Luke, gets him clear so he can take the shot. And again, he's turned, he realized, whether through Obi-Wan's suggestion or not, they realize, the computer isn't going to work. So, he turns off the computer and then he's able to take the shot himself. It's kind of the theme is like, George Lucas had this theme about, the human condition and, what people are capable of, not necessarily technology. And which is weird because he actually invented technology to tell this story about the human condition versus technology. And but anyway, and that's how, they're able to win. That's how, the rebels, making that Hail Mary play. And it pays off for them. And they win the day. But, so it's that kind of look there, they're able to, they're able to take care, they're able to exploit things that the Empire overlooks. They don't expect a threat. They don't have the tight enough defense to take care of them. To take care of the fighters. So they're able to use them. And they're able to win. A lot of dead air now.
Yeah. No, it's you've said it all about how the Empire acts. They're arrogant.
Yeah. It's that hubris, and they're able to use that against them. Time and time again. But you see, the things that the rebels are doing, they commit everything to a battle. Whereas, the Empire doesn't seem to do that.
No, they always have more resources. They have a deeper bench than the rebellion does.
Yeah, but they also don't throw everything they have at them, because I think if they did, they would have, they'd wipe them out. They tend to, we'll just use what's necessary kind of thing. We're not going to just, we're only blowing up the escape pods that have life forms in them. Because they kind of toss it away side. I must have short circuited. Don't worry about it. They're always, if they were really concerned, they'd be blowing everything up.
Or sending out their entire TIE fighter complement instead of just a handful of flights.
I will say, and this is one thing I do like, is, there are, if you're a fan of the fan edit community, if you watch Star Wars Revisited, he reimagined, Adiwan reimagined that battle, that space battle at the end, and he has like tons of fighters coming in. I love the way he did it. It was really good. It's really the only way I watch the movie now. But, I guess it's one thing we can look at now is that, this movie had, we were talking about it earlier, is George Lucas has changed these movies. It's like 20 years after Star Wars comes out, he re-released it with a special edition. And he updated a lot of special effects that I thought were, it was,
some good, some bad.
It was like, there was things like, some good. It was like a lot of the space battle was shot differently.
Different, more dynamic shots.
Yeah.
More dynamic shots.
It's crazy.
Expanding the look of Mos Eisley to actually make it seem like a busy spaceport.
Yep. And then not so good, Greedo actually getting a shot off. I can't do it. But like I said, it doesn't break Star Wars for me, and they've kind of refined it in re-releases as opposed to like the DVD and the Blu-ray. But when you first saw it in '97, it's like, what did I just see? Or even like bringing in, I mean, there's mixed reactions to having Jabba the Hutt restoring that scene. I think as neat as far as a technical achievement, you know, putting Jabba the Hutt in there, because even like having Han walk around him and he steps on his tail and all that, they had to make that happen.
Well, because the original scene, it was a human.
Yeah,
it was a big deal. So they had to digitally raise him up to make him look. And if you see the original concept of it, like he clips through Jabba.
Yep.
They had a lot of work to actually make it look like, to make it seamlessly look like he was walking around. He did a circle around Jabba.
Yeah, but the thing is, there also, I look at it is, yeah, it was an interesting way to put it, and George Lucas and his rationale for putting that scene back in was he wanted to tie the first and the third movies together. Bringing Jabba in did that. I like the technological aspect of putting him in there. The scene kind of doesn't work now for me because it's basically rehashing the conversation that Han has with Greedo. So I can...
I think it... To me, I've never had that issue with it, just because Han straight up says, hey, if you really want to talk to me, come
don't
yourself.
Send these goons. Yeah.
Don't send some of these twerps after me.
Good point.
I've never had an issue with that particular edition.
Yeah, I like I said, it doesn't, even the Greedo getting a shot off doesn't break Star Wars for me. It doesn't, but it's just like, again, it's just, okay, I see why you wanted to put it in there. Was it the best choice? I would say no. But it's like I said, it's not, I don't lay awake at night going, why did he put the Jabba scene back in the movie?
I don't
That doesn't happen. No, I don't. I honestly don't. But there were some changes. I think there's some effect shots. Like there's one, like when they're on the Falcon where Luke has a green lightsaber for like it's only for like a quick second, but it's like, geez, ILM, were you paying attention? What were you guys? Who's the QC guy on this? How'd that get through? The little things like that, it just kind of annoys me. But I mean, I honestly can understand why. Like I said, making the space battle at the end more dynamic is for me, great.
Typically, I don't. Yeah, most of the changes the special editions have over the years haven't bothered me. I think the only ones that really irritate me to this day is the relatively recent edition of Greedo going McClunky.
Oh yeah, that's in the streaming.
Yeah, that and then the addition of Darth Vader going no in Return of the Jedi when he tosses the Emperor down the reactor.
Hey, spoilers. That's episode 3.
Whatever. Those are the only two, because they feel so out of. They feel.
Well, I think
to me,
honestly, that your Return of the Jedi one, which we can talk about more when we talk about that movie, it's almost a straight cut and paste from the No in Revenge of the Sith.
It is.
It's just that again, and that was it's kind of lazy. Guys are going to spend this kind of money on this.
There was no need to add Vader saying anything in that scene.
No, I agree.
His actions spoke volumes. It's
all I needed.
It's an old filmmaking rule. Show me, don't tell me.
Yeah, show, don't tell. So, that's when they're talking about like exposition.
Yeah. No, but I feel like that applies in the scene. Is you're telling me what Vader's thinking instead of just showing me.
Yeah, there's that. But if you look at it, even though Vader has some of the more iconic lines even in Star Wars, some of the best scenes of him are just him walking around and all you hear is the breathing. Yeah. Like he's walking around in the Death Star. He says that one quick thing when they're looking at the Falcon and he's like, I sense something. He senses Obi-Wan's presence. And then later on, he's walking through a hallway.
I wonder, he's either does he sense Obi-Wan, or is he sensing Luke, and he can sense a little bit of Padme in that. It's not right. I agree. It's probably Obi-Wan, but I feel like
at this point, if you look at the film again, I
as
think we're
by
going too
itself,
far.
yeah.
We're, this is the self-contained film. Didn't know there was going to be another. He senses Obi-Wan's presence, and like you see him. He's walking down the hallway in the Death Star, and he stops, and he looks, and then keeps going. He knows something's up because of the Force. He can sense his presence, and as much as Obi-Wan's trying to hide, and it's just, again, it's just, it's that, yes, Vader has that presence without saying anything. And again, we can talk about that one later, and just staying here in this one.
It's hard to do that because it's so.
It is, but again,
it's
we're
all
looking at this one as a foundation, and it is interconnected. But this one is the one where you think about Star Wars this is the one that they didn't know there was going to be another one. They did not expect it to blow up the way it did, and it's so like I said, this is the one story that can be told by itself. It doesn't rely on any other movie. This story does have a beginning, middle, end. It left it open with Vader getting away. The Emperor is mentioned, so there's still an Emperor out there. There's still an Empire. But even though the Rebels win this day, and they have the ceremony at the end, you got to think there's guys in the background. We got to pack up our crap. They're coming.
We got to go.
we need to. We got to be out of here. So yeah, it's, as far as the story, you look at it, and it has a lot of nods to other movies in the past, like these old serials, like we were saying, and it's a great adventure story. It's you've got the beginning of your hero's journey in this, and it's just and it's a great tale, and it's something that just like I said, it changed cinema, it changed pop culture, and it's just, I think about, I still remember the first time going to see this movie as a 6-year-old kid, and every time I watch it, I think of that time, where I'm sitting there with my popcorn, and my dad sitting next to me, and he's reading the opening crawl because 6-year-old me couldn't read that fast. And it's one of those things I'll remember forever. My dad just passed about a month and a half, and, it's just one of those stories that, I'll have forever. And, it's just really great, and the fact that this blew up the way it did, and, this story, and it's kind of fun for me to share it with, with my kids now. And it's just, it's one of those things. It's become this timeless thing, and it all happened, and it was just something that a story George Lucas wanted to tell, and very few people had faith in it. And it's really just, it's as we
it's
go
weird.
on.
It's weird to come across a person in this day and age who hasn't seen Star Wars.
I know. And
it's so when you my brother's girlfriend is one of those people, and when she said that I've never seen Star Wars, I'm like, what?
I know. It's I'll see a video on YouTube every so often. It's like, oh, her reaction for seeing this scene, and I'm like, how could you? There's a guy.
There's a YouTube channel I just started following recently that she started off with watching all the Star Wars films and recording her reactions to it, and it's like it is so great to see. Again, it's shocking to be like, have you not seen Star Wars?
Exactly.
But it's great to see someone's reaction to all these different things, like when they find out, spoilers, that Vader is Luke's father, and the reaction of the person just going, what?
Yeah.
It's like, how do you even if you haven't seen the Star Wars
spoilers,
movies,
man, spoilers.
I said spoiler.
We don't know that yet.
It's weird to like how all pervasively it's infiltrated the cultural zeitgeist that even if you haven't seen Star Wars, you probably should know that that Vader is Luke's father, or that other such big
there's so
iconic
big
moments.
things. Yeah, exactly. There's another channel, and I it's kind of funny. There's a YouTube channel, Quinn's Ideas. I recommend him. He's big into Dune, especially with Denis Villeneuve's Dune coming out this year.
I have that book
I can't
to read
wait.
at some
I know,
point.
but I mean, again, whereas like we said, Star Wars was a movie they made into a novel to promote the movie. Dune is a movie made from a novel. And honestly, the movie Dune that came out in the mid 80s would not have happened if not for Star Wars. And this guy, Quinn's Ideas, and again, I'm not bashing the guy's channel. I think he's really great on Dune. But he had this, I've never seen Star Wars, and I was like, I really find that hard to believe, dude. Being such a big fan of Dune and being a big fan of I wouldn't say, the Dune movie. I mean, he references all the. Don't you know that wouldn't have happened without this movie? I find it a little hard to believe. But then again, if you like Dune and stuff, I recommend him. He's really great on that. But I don't want to
pimp other people's channels.
Well, no, I don't mind promoting a good channel. I really don't. Even it doesn't matter if there's good content out there. If nobody ever heard of him, that's great. But I don't want to go down that road because that's not what we're discussing here. But again, I mean, you think about what happened after this movie, and we were talking about as a cultural thing. I mean, once this this movie was so big, everybody wanted their own Star Wars. So then you all of a sudden, hey, Star Trek the motion picture. So they make
even things you wouldn't traditionally think of as sci-fi.
Yeah.
James Bond's Moonraker film
came out. There's another one.
Moonraker was a direct response to the new craze about sci-fi that Star Wars brought about.
Yeah, but even on TV, you had Battlestar Galactica. Buck Rogers with Gil Gerard, Aaron Gray. That lasted a couple seasons. You had, so many. I mean, all these different movies that came out in the 80s, all these different sci-fi projects that came out, then there's too many. I can, going through my head now to just tap down one, but I mean, there were so many, but like Dune probably would not have been made if it weren't for the success of Star Wars, because everybody wanted a Star Wars. And there were so many B-movie ripoffs too, but I mean, even like Saturday morning cartoons, you had like, Thundar the Barbarian. I mean, he had a lightsaber. Everybody all of a sudden had a laser sword. And it was. There were so many things that they tried to clone and mimic this, and to varying degrees of success. But I mean, it was just now all of a sudden. But I mean, a lot of the things that were coming out in the 70s. I mean, like I said, the highest grossing movie of all time before Star Wars was Jaws. And you had movies like 2001, which were were big successes, but I mean, it wasn't. They were nothing like this. And
well, clearly, you don't have a wall full of 2001: A Space Odyssey toys.
No, I've got the Blu-ray. That's about it.
I haven't watched that. And
I've read the books, but by the way, I recommend the novel for 2001.
Oh yeah,
because they go to Saturn, and it's so different, but it's so great.
I haven't watched that movie in 20 years. I've read the books.
Well, I watch it. I like it because I mean, there's another one where you can kind of tell that George Lucas was probably influenced a little bit by it because of with the way the music was, but more orchestral, the big score instead of the techno pop music you would get in a science fiction movie of the day, So, I mean, there was that. I mean, but that again, you had the blockbuster. People, cosplaying became a thing, dressing up like the characters, the merchandising. I mean, it took a while, but I mean.
Yeah, you got.
I'm just saying it.
You got one or two.
Some people probably bought a few toys.
One or two.
Yeah. But I was like, it was the merchandising and everything else, everything.
It's
It was huge.
it's not hard to draw a direct path from Star Wars to the modern pop culture. You know
Yeah,
how everything is. You can't go to a Comic Con no matter what the convention's about. You can't go to a Comic Con without seeing, you know, 1,000 stormtroopers thanks to the 501st, or any other Star Wars cosplayers, but just see Star Wars products
yeah.
all over the place available for sale.
Heck, there's conventions just for Star Wars.
Even going to just for Star Wars,
Yeah,
so like Celebration. But even going to a convention that's seemingly detached from that realm, like if you go to an anime convention, you're still going to see Star Wars stuff there,
yeah,
even though it's focused on a completely different realm of pop culture. Star Wars is
yeah,
still present.
yeah. It's an amazing phenomenon that happened there, and it all started.
And very few the only other large scale property I would say that has as much overall impact beyond very niche groups is the Marvel universe. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has brought a very nerdy niche interest out into the larger
Yeah,
general populace. You can say you can argue you can say Star Trek is very popular, and it is. But at the same time, the average person probably doesn't know a whole lot beyond what random facts. Whereas now the random person knows Star Wars. The random person knows the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
yeah. Heck, the Marvel Cinematic Universe references Star Wars.
The entire Phase 2, every movie
Yeah,
had
it was an Empire Strikes Back thing.
Someone lost an arm in every movie in the second phase of the Marvel.
I know exactly. There's nods to it everywhere now, and it's just an amazing phenomenon that this happened, and it's just really just an incredible story that it happened. I think looking at it outside of the movie itself, and I mean, you look at how because movies just weren't stories in cinema were not told in this way. I mean, the way these guys, the way the special effects guys came up with shots, and George Lucas, he was trying to be reminiscent of like the gun camera footage from the newsreels from World War II, kind of thing. So it was neat to bring that to his storytelling. I mean, it was it wasn't like it hadn't been invented. It was there, but nobody had thought to use it, and I think that was. It was just really kind of an incredible way for him to do it, and it really definitely brought out this it definitely resonated, and it was just really kind of an incredible way that it happened. I mean, you got to think a lot of this. I mean, this movie came out, we were just 2 years out of the Vietnam War, and America, I mean, Jimmy Carter was president. He was kind of presiding over the decline. And then you have this story, which, is a story of hope. And it really resonated with people. I think, of the time, it was, the good guys beating the bad guy, and just, having that, the heroes winning the day type of story. It was just kind of, I'm not saying that there weren't other stories like that, but this one just, is just, I mean, it's basically a classic, a timeless story told in a new way. And it just was a success all around. I mean, not all critics liked it, but then again, critics generally at the time didn't like science fiction type movies. Or space opera. They just didn't. It wasn't really what they wanted to see. So, but I mean, that's pretty much what I have from here. I mean, I think we've talked this one through. So we'll have to start on episode 2, which will be covering episode 5 as we go through this story. So, as we're at the point now, so I thank everyone for watching. If you made it this far, please like, subscribe.
So sorry.
Leave a comment. Actually, I would love to hear, if you're watching this, leave a comment below about the first time you saw Star Wars. Was it in a theater? Was it in, back in the original release? Was it the special editions? Did you see it in a marathon before seeing The Force Awakens or Revenge of the Sith or any of that? Or was it at home? Was it on TV? Was it home video? Did you rent the movie from Blockbuster? Did you get, did you watch the Laserdisc? Whatever it was. I want to hear that story of other people, the first time you saw Star Wars and what it was like for you. And so, Corey, where else can people find you? And I'll leave links in the description below for all of this.
I can be found on Twitter at Corey D. Newman.
Yeah. And do you know anything
Come
with
listen.
Twitch?
Yeah, Twitch. I forget what my Twitch is off the top of my head.
I'll leave a link in the description below for Twitch because you have done a lot of streams.
Some good, some bad.
Yeah. Well, no, I really enjoyed the Mass Effect ones, but I'm thinking of trying to do one of the Knights of the Old Republic 2 with the completion mod and just going through that because a lot of people have never seen that. But I might do that down the road.
Yeah, people like watching me play games that make either story-based games or games that make me suffer in some way. So
yeah, we all enjoy watching you suffer.
I do it for the fans. I do is for the fans.
Good man. All right, well, that'll bring this episode to a close. I want to thank everybody for watching. Again, please like, subscribe, leave a comment below. And that's all for now. So may the Force be with you.